Well, I mean, first of all, you're not going to go to a better school in the country. We have a proven track record of and a reputation that really is second to none. The beauty of this place is it teaches you how to learn at a much higher level. Our network is second to none. The reason you want to come to Amherst is this place is going to work for you for the next 40 and 50 years.
How do you guys think you'd fare in the playoffs, or the NESCAC would fare in the playoffs?
The winner of the NESCAC would fare incredibly well, certainly in New England and the Northeast. Certainly the first couple of rounds, I think the NESCAC would fare incredibly well. And I do think there's a desire from the coaching body that, why not? The other sports get that opportunity. Why don't the football athletes get that opportunity? So,
who was your defensive line coach in the year 1999 to 2000?
Yeah, Matty Patricia. Really, we were his first coaching job. If he listened to me, he would have been the O-line coach at St. Lawrence. The kid freaking kicks a 2-yard field goal with 3 seconds to beat us. It was a horrific loss, and yet people talk about it as the greatest game in New England football history. It was a heck of a game.
With the start of the college football season, I wanted to release my interview with New England's most active, winningest college head football coach. In the world of football, where some coaches only stay for 1 to 2 years, you're always looking for that next big job or that position that can elevate them, and rightfully so. But very rarely that you have a head coach that has been at his school for 30 plus years. That's right. 30 years. Coach E.J. Mills has been at Amherst College since 1992 when he took over as a defensive coordinator. And in 1997, he would take over as the interim head coach at 29 years old, becoming one of the youngest head coaches in all of America. They would go on to be 7-1, and the interim tag was removed. Since taking over, Amherst has consistently been one of the top powerhouses in all of the NESCAC, winning 6 championships in the 2000s. As it stands, Coach Mills has 152 wins at Amherst, which is ridiculous when they only started playing 9 games in 2017, and they can't even qualify for the NCAA playoffs in football in the NESCAC. Throughout these 30 years, Mills has ascended to one of the top coaches in all of New England, and Amherst is a premier program in the NESCAC. And after sitting down with him, I understand how he did it, through relationships with his coaches and his players. Because if you look at the coaching history, they've had numerous coaches that have gone on to have a ton of success, whether it be at the high school level all the way to the NFL. I reached out to Coach Mills because I had to know his story, how he's been able to build Amherst into the traditional powerhouse that they are in the NESCAC, why he stayed there for 30 plus years, to learn more about the biggest little game in America, their rivalry versus Williams College, and ultimately I wanted to know what it takes to be an Amherst Mammoth. So I took the trip out to the beautiful, beautiful Amherst College, my first NESCAC school I've ever seen, by the way, and we had over a 1-hour sit-down interview with New England's most active, winning college head coach. And it took me a while to say, welcome back, or welcome to Recruiting Board. I'm Alex Agrella, where I cover and promote high school and college football around New England. Do me a huge favor, like this video, because it really helps with the algorithm and push the video out. Oh, and subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna assume some of you are new, but nobody produces content like me around New England. So if you wanna really show your support, it is free to subscribe to the channel and help us promote New England football. I'm almost at 4,000 subscribers, but I want to hit it by October 1st. So that is my goal. If you can help me get there, I'd appreciate it. All right, without further ado, and what all of you have come to see, the Coach E.J. Mills sit-down interview. Guys, we made the trip out to Amherst to see the legend himself, New England's at most active, winningest college head coach, Coach E.J. Mills, the head coach of the Amherst Mammoths. Coach, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Alex. I appreciate you coming out. Happy to spend some time with you today.
Yeah, Coach, so how's the summer been so far?
It's great. We're working. We're kind of out doing camps. A bunch of guys out today. We were at Yale yesterday and Dartmouth today and then Yale again on Sunday. So it's we're in full-blown recruitment mode right now. But it's also the summer. there's no kids around. The schedule is a little bit more flexible, so things are great.
What's like going to be the timeline? So we'll obviously talk about the recruiting in the NESCAC and then the timelines that you're going to be going through. But if you want to talk about the next couple months of your summer leading up to camp.
The NESCAC, we have kind of a, in order to offer, you're talking about offering support in admission, we have to go through an official pre-read with our admissions office. We were able to start to submit those pre-reads on June 15th, and we start to hear back on the results of those pre-reads on July 1st. And then once you know what the pre-read is, then you can start to offer support or kind of figure out who are the kids that make the most sense for you to actively go after and say, hey, listen, you have an opportunity here. Do you want it? Most of our recruiting is centered around early decision. So when you're making an offer, it's they would go early decision to your school. July 1st, that you get some results back, and then that next 6 weeks or so prior to camp, you're trying to get as many kids to maybe jump on board, or you're starting to set up visits for game day visits and trying to nail it down. So that's where we're at in our process.
And the NESCAC has different recruiting than anyone else, Coach.
Yeah.
Anyone else. If you want to just talk about having to recruit as an NESCAC coach, because I feel like you've already done your homework on these guys.
There's pros and cons, right? We talk about you can't go on the road. There's a lot of coaches who are like, are you kidding me? That's awesome. You don't have to go traipse around to different high schools and going to do home visits. The NESCAC does not allow us to do that. We obviously are out and about doing all sorts of summer camps, getting out to evaluate as many kids as we can, and obviously trying to get as many kids to visit as we can. It is the most restrictive conference, and yet we're very national schools. There's a high interest level in these schools, and people want to attend them because they're phenomenal schools, not only academically, but athletically. Our process is trying to find the kids that we think can get into the school and matriculate and do the things that we need them to do, both on and off the field.
But let's talk about a big win for the NESCACs this year. You had spring ball, Coach.
Yeah, no, it was funny. They gave us spring ball in 22. Because that was kind of a COVID measure. Then they took it away. They wanted to reassess. And so we got a little bit smaller version, right? The NCAA allows 15 practices. We were able to do 10. The NCAA allows 4 uppers practices. We're just using helmets, but it was phenomenal, right? The idea of getting on the field with your players, especially your younger players, that when you come in as a first year, you come right into camp. There's a lot of transition. We start school pretty quickly. Those kids they oftentimes don't really have an opportunity to learn, understand, develop. And so that spring ball for those young kids especially was amazing. And I commented to our coaches, like, I can't believe we haven't had it. It just seemed like, where would we be if we didn't have those 10 practices? You feel like you're much more prepared to come in August 20th and hit the ground running. It was pretty awesome, and I'm excited. I think it's here to stay. I'm super excited about that.
And what did you learn in your first spring?
Part of the reason I think we got it is the relationships with your players. The spring practice is just a little different, right? You're not building to a game. So you're getting an opportunity to spend time with the kids, intimately with your position groups, etc., and just having fun playing football. That was a big part of it, is that relationship building, making those connections with your players. But then obviously we're able to install all the different changes that you're thinking about. And it's like a dry run. Some things are good, some things are bad. You keep stuff, you throw stuff out. Before, we're doing that August 25th. Now you have an opportunity to assess, have it on film, etc. So it was awesome. The kids loved it. It was proportional. 3 weeks, 10 practices. It wasn't crazy. I think we'll all benefit from it, not only on the field, but I think that those relationships, just that the building of team in the off season, which is so critical, I think that's going to be a good thing moving forward.
If you want to talk about the Mammoths for the 2024 season, some of your returners, the landscape of what your team will look like this year.
We have not had the success the last few years as we had the previous 10. We had a great run, winning a bunch of championships. We have been a little bit middle of the road the last few years, which is not where you want to be. Really excited about the team we have coming back. This is the last year of the COVID holdovers, right? These kids were impacted. So, we have a bunch of fifth-year players that are coming back. So I'm really excited about the senior leadership that we have, and really just that progression of development. It's a great group. We had a great spring, And I'm super excited to see what we can do in 24. Do I think we can win every game that we play? Yes. Do I think we could lose every game we can play? Yes, right? The NESCAC is incredibly competitive. You got to show up every week. Every week's a championship game. We don't have playoffs. Every week is about building momentum to try and the elusive 9-0, which oftentimes that's what it takes to win a championship. I'm super excited about where we are. We're still trying to figure out the quarterback spot. We're going to have some competition there, but we had an excellent spring and super excited about our roster coming into 24 season. Team 143. I mean, that's, we kind of branded that, highlight a little bit the tradition that exists at a place like Amherst. But every year is different. People ask me, you've been here a long time. 143 is totally different than 142, right? You have different senior leadership. And so you're trying to build and craft that team to see what they can do. What is their identity? What is their culture? And so we're excited where 143 is.
Who are some of the senior leaders you'll be relying on for 143?
So, Anthony Lenahan will be a two-time captain. That doesn't happen very often at places like Amherst. Anthony's a defensive lineman out of St. Joe's in Philadelphia, just an outstanding football player. So we're excited for what he brings to the table. I'll kind of go through the four captains.
Yeah.
Philip Slaughter is another defensive lineman from North Carolina, been a 3-year starter for us, great leadership. Great energy. Jack Roberge is a tailback from Connecticut. Just been a really good football player for us. Great leader, wants to be a Navy SEAL. And if you know Jack, there's no question he'll accomplish that. I mean, he is just a locked-in human being who grinds it every single day. And then Owen Gatos is a slot receiver for us. If you saw Owen, Owen's not the biggest guy, maybe not even the fastest guy, but is an amazing receiver, understands football, can get open, is impossible to cover. He's one of those guys. And so those guys will be kind of that foundation of leadership. And our defense was outstanding last year. We feel we return a lot of players. Luke Harmon is a rising junior from St. Albans in D.C., plays our Viper position. He was a first-team All-Leaguer, our team MVP. We're going to rely heavily on that crew. I'm excited about the group, and we'll see. We report August 20th, and we're excited to see what we can do.
Let's talk about the NESCAC as a whole. You've been around it for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to hear, before we get into you, just the evolution of it. And it's a league that's different than every other league in the country. No matter every other league in the country, For starters, I want to ask you, let's talk about how it's changed over these years, Coach, from when you first started here in 93.
You go back to 93 and, most of the coaches at that time were probably doing two sports. I was a softball coach. The recruitment, there just wasn't that investment maybe in time, and just the way that even the way that kids were attracting to Amherst. I think back then we probably had 4,000 apps. Now we have 15,000 apps. I mean, so I guess the popularity of these schools, and certainly they've always been incredible academic places, but then the desire to kind of access those schools and the commitment for a diverse community, et cetera. The change has been just the level of play has continued to get better. The level of coaching. And again, when I say that, meaning that the commitment to hire full-time, not only head coaches, but assistant coaches that are working at football 24/7, 365. And then really just the commitment has kind of, each school has put the resources into football, and that's where you see more parity. And so there was a time back in the day, we might say there was 3 or 4 games you could win. I don't want to say just show up. You always have to work hard, but there was a disparity, and that's not the way it is right now. The league there's a lot of parity. Everybody is working incredibly hard. Miami of Ohio had a camp outside of Dayton in Ohio the first week of June, and every NESCAC's there. You're not necessarily outworking people, right? I mean, because everybody's doing it. I think that's been one of the biggest changes, and yet there's been a few schools that have won most of the championships. That's kind of stayed consistent. Top to bottom, the competition, I would say on the field, but then in terms of off the field, a competitiveness to matriculate student athletes, that has changed as well. If you were around the NESCAC way back when, it's like, oh, well, if a kid got into Amherst or got into Williams, they're going. Well, that's not necessarily the case anymore. Kids are going to make their decision based on what's the best fit, best school, or however people say that. So it's just gotten more competitive. With that, it's in many ways more enjoyable. Like you said, it's a great league. No doubt about it.
And one thing that's different is you guys don't have playoffs, right? But you have it in other sports, and they're good. in other sports. You know, there was that year it was Williams and Amherst were in the national championship for basketball.
Yep.
Tufts is really good in lacrosse. Like, how do you guys think you'd fare in the playoffs, or in the NESCAC would fare in the playoffs?
I think there's been a lot of discussion about that, and I do think in the near future you might see the league champion get it automatic bid. You know, I mean, I think there's been some discussion, but I think, you know, the winner of the NESCAC would fare incredibly well, certainly in New England and the Northeast. I think, you know, when you get deeper in the playoffs in Division III football, there's a lot of similar cast of characters that you see, you know, Mount Union and the Wisconsin schools that just have massive programs and get a ton of Division I transfers. So I don't know how deep, but certainly the first couple rounds, I think the NESCAC would fare incredibly well. And I do think there's a desire from the coaching body that, you know, why not? The other sports get that opportunity. Why don't the football athletes get that opportunity? So I think that may be on the horizon, but we'll see.
We won the spring battle. And then I had another question, though. They got the 9th game.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, having been in the league for so long, and we played 8, and we used to scrimmage the odd team or whatever. And there was many times when I was cynical at Ben. I'm like, yeah, we're not getting that 9th game. And then it just, at some point, the presidents change over, and it was very logical that we would play every team in the league. It made perfect sense. So yeah, that was, God, I can't even think of the year, but I think it was 2017, I believe, was the first year that we went to 9 games. It is a grind, right? We don't get bye weeks. A lot of Division III leagues play 10 games, but they get a bye week. You know, we play 9 straight, which is a grind. But yeah, it was the right thing to do. Yeah, we were happy to get that.
If you just, lastly, before we move on to you, I mean, if you just want to talk about, every week's a big week in the NESCAC, but if you just want to talk about specifically some of the Giants this year, you know, you're expected to face.
Last year, you know, Mid and Trin, you know, both went 8-0. Trinity has been a dominant team in the league for a long time. Obviously, that's always circled. You know, Middlebury has won a lot of championships as well, and they're just a quality program. So, you know, they return a lot of good players, and you know that. But, you know, I mean, obviously, Williams for us, we circle that game. That's the biggest little game, and the Little 3 is still special around here, you know, with Amherst, Williams, and Wesleyan. But the way you kind of train your team and your coaches is we're focused on Bates, right? That's who we get an opportunity to play first. And so you don't want to peek down the road. You stay locked in. You're just trying to be the best team you can be. You can only control so many things. So we need to develop that depth because you know you're going to have injury. You know, we feel if we take care of business and we continue to develop our players and become the best team we can be, I believe we'll fare very well week to week and things like that. A lot of things have to happen, right? You got to stay healthy. You get some bad hops or you get some good hops. And so typically you need those in order to have a really successful season. But we're focused on the process of working hard every single day, getting a little bit better, and that's going to give us the best chance to be the best team in the fall.
So let's move on to you, Coach, what the people came to see. So, Coach, we always start from the beginning when we talk about our guests. Where are you from?
I was actually born in Syracuse, New York, but moved to Rochester when I was an infant. So I grew up in Rochester, New York. Great mom and dad. Unfortunately, they both passed, but their influence on me, that'll never change. But I was just really fortunate to grow up in a community, sports-based. My dad was a golf course superintendent, grew up on a golf course, working on the course, playing golf, playing every sport. I was a baseball, football, basketball guy. I was the kid in the neighborhood organizing the games, calling people to meet here to play, picking teams. Nobody's surprised that I'm a coach, just in terms of the way I grew up. Grew up in Rochester, Snowbelt, but it was a great place to grow up. I went to Aquinas, which was an all-boys Catholic high school. We merged with a girls' school after 2 years, but if you do any research on high school football in the United States in the 50s, Aquinas was a national power. Had a plane, used to fly all over the country. I very early got into that history and the pageantry of football. It was just kind of in my blood, I guess, growing up. The fact that I got here, I have a lot of people to thank, amazing mentors that I worked for and with that allowed me the opportunity to get here.
That was one of my questions. You know, who are some of those people? We might as well ask it now.
Yeah, I mean, my high school coach was Rich Parinello, and Rich was a really good player at the University of Rochester. After he was my head coach at Aquinas, became the head coach at the University of Rochester. They instilled just a love of football in me. Went to the University of Dayton, and I played baseball. I almost went to the U of R to play football and baseball, but I chose to get out of town. I probably had a little bit better opportunities in baseball, and it was a Division I school. I took that path, but I was very interested in being a high school football and baseball coach. Teach social studies, that's what I was gonna do. And so in the summers, I would work camps. But I was fortunate enough to get a job at Mid Lakes High School coming out of college, which is outside of Rochester. And I worked for a guy named Dave Whitcomb. Dave, incredibly successful high school football coach. He was an athletic director. And I'll tell you what, he was the one that really got me passionate about the preparation of football. As a high school coach, I was 24, I was in. And I'd show up at the school at 5 in the morning, and I was leaving at 10 at night. I had my classes teaching social studies, but I loved coaching. And we had 2 great years, amazing teams.
So I want to ask about your high school roots. What is it like coaching in high school? How did that shape your career?
It was, I'll say this. It's about making connection with players, right? I mean, if you're gonna get a kid to do something that he doesn't want to do, you've got to have a connection with that kid. He's got to trust you that you're working as hard as you possibly can. So that I learned early on, that you got to get in there with the kids. If they screw up, it's not them, it's us. That was something Dave Whitcomb taught me, and I really learned it at Albany, is that you're in this together. What your players do is a reflection of you. And so you've got to teach them the best way that you possibly can. Walk it, chalk it, talk it, whatever it is. But it's not what I know, it's what I can put in their minds, right? I can get them to perform and understand. We don't try to overcomplicate, and yet you got to give the kids the tools in order to be successful. And I think I learned that at an early age, but I also learned that you got to grind it, but you also got to have fun. It's a game. Keeping it light in the proper way. I always say I'm a yeller, screamer, excitable guy, but I don't yell at you, I yell to you. And I believe I learned that at Albany as well, that you can get on kids. It's not personal. This is about us trying to do something really hard. Winning football games is hard. And so everybody's working hard. We got to do something to separate ourselves. And so that's always been my focus.
And so you get to Albany, right? And what was the landscape of the conference at that time? It's a lot different now, isn't it?
Yeah. Dave went to Ithaca. Mike Welch was the head coach at Ithaca. He came to recruit some of our players. And I said, I'd love to get into college football. And he said, well, you got to go to Albany. You got to talk to Bob Ford. I was fortunate enough to get an interview. I interviewed at Albany, and I get the GA spot. The guys that I worked with at Albany, it's a who's who. Bob Ford is an amazing human being, changed my life. He's changed many people's lives in coaching, and really that's what got me my start in college football. I mean, we were Division III school at that time. So we were playing Ithaca, we were playing Union, we were playing Springfield College. I mean, it was competitive. We were on the road scouting. My first game, my first year GA, I missed the first game because we were off scouting other teams, right? And so, I GA'd my first year. Dave Clausen, who's the head coach at Wake Forest, was the secondary coach, and I was his assistant. And so we worked intimately together. Matt Ballard, who's been on my staff for 20 years, we GA'd together and coached together at Albany. It was an amazing laboratory of football coaches. There was 10 young guys, GAs, that we just did football. I mean, we had a lot of fun, but we worked hard at football. It was competitive. Coach Ford gave us a ton of responsibility. You had to step it up every single day, and you kind of learned on the fly. I was calling defenses my second year. Sometimes I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but I was figuring it out on the fly.
Your first experience in college. What are some of the mistakes you're making? What are some of the things you would tell young coaches getting into college?
The first thing you learn at Albany is it's grab and oar. Coach Ford says that all the time, but that means we did everything. Right? And so you learn early on, there's no entitlement. It's whatever needs to be done, do it. Be proactive, and there's no job too big, there's no job too small. Our nature of the beast was you were going to race into the office and be the first one there if you could. You were going to stay as long or longer than you should, simply because there's always work to be done. That's kind of what you learn at Albany. But then you also learn that we're going to have fun. We're going to build relationships as coaches, and then with your players. It was a magical 2 years that we had so much fun. But you learn a lot of football. I mean, because you're constantly entrenched. Coach put on clinics every week. So there was always coaches coming in the office clinicking us. So it was just a laboratory. And if you soaked it up, you were going to learn a lot of football. And that's what we did.
And obviously, they're not a D3 program anymore.
No.
What went right for them?
I think what happened was SUNY wanted some flagship schools. Basketball was the entry level, right, because of the NCAA tournament. And I think Coach Ford took them from a club program, Division III, Division II, non-scholarship 1AA, and then ultimately, scholarship football. And so I think that was just an evolution, not only for the university, But Coach Ford was an incredible driver behind those moving up those levels.
So you get to Ramapo. If you want to talk about how that happened, then we'll get into how it shut down and all that. So Ramapo was a D3 college in New Jersey.
Yep. And so Ramapo had a nice little run. And Jim Maselli was the coach, did a really nice job. They had some fallout of players and different things. So Rich Skrosky, young guy, had been a GA at Rutgers. He hires me as the defensive coordinator. One of my best friends from Albany, Steve Weiss, as the offensive coordinator. We left Albany together. We go down to Ramapo. We had almost no team. We got there April 1st. There was only like 12 or 14 players. We recruited 70 guys from April to like May 15th, going around New Jersey.
No athletic scholarships.
No, nothing. And I mean, that was you want to talk about a journey. Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. But there was some good talent. We had a tough schedule. We ended up going, I think 4-6 that year. It was incredible. I learned so much from Rich. Now I'm the coordinator, so I'm in charge. You have nowhere to go. You learn on the fly. You're coaching your coaches because we had young guys. That Ramapo experience.
It's been, okay, Coach, I gotta ask. It's been over 30 years. Give me the juice. Ain't nobody around no more, Coach.
No, it was insane. I mean, we had kids. It was mostly Jersey kids, a lot of city kids. Interestingly enough, I mean, it broadened my horizons incredibly because if you go to Ramapo, it's a beautiful suburb. Mahwah, New Jersey, where Ramapo is, high rent district, upper middle class. Our team was incredibly diverse, mostly African-American players from Newark, etc. And one of my players, his brother was in the NFL, and he had a sweet car. And I remember one time he's like, well, Coach, every time I drive this car, I get pulled over by the cops. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he goes, no, that happens. And so I was pretty naive as a 24-year-old, probably just not understanding the ways of the world. I saw it happen all the time. They got pulled over all the time. And I was like, that's not right. And it was because that these young African-American kids were driving a really nice car and they just assumed the worst. It was definitely one of the things that, just kind of opened my eyes to the world and different things. And then getting an opportunity to come to Amherst, this is a place that challenges you every single day to look at things differently. And so it's been an amazing run for me, just in terms of personal growth and what you learn and what's important. But yeah, Ramapo, there was a lot of shady stuff that went on there, I would say. I love my experience there, but I was glad to be able to get out. We get to the end of the year and we're at the convention in Atlanta. The president calls Rich and says they're dropping football. They want to go in a different direction. A lot of these schools have football to fill beds and to do different things, and they just went in a different direction. But it was funny. It was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because it was very public. So everyone was talking about it. Like, it was just one of those things. We're at the convention, so everyone knows you're looking for a job.
Well, and this is in like the 80s?
92.
92. So before the internet, really.
Yeah. So it's like, it just got like, it took traction. Everyone's like, oh man. Albany is a massive coaching fraternity.
Right.
And that's when I met, two of my best friends in coaching, Kevin Morris and Bob Benson, worked for Jackson Leckie at WPI. I interviewed at Union coming out of Albany, didn't get the job, but Kevin Morris was impressed. At the time, Jackson Leckie was having success at WPI. Amherst had fallen on some hard times. They're looking for a head coach. Sid is interviewing at Amherst. Sid's like, yeah, if I get this, I want you to apply for a job. Came and interviewed. Dave Clausen interviewed against me for that position. And I got it. We always joke about it. He goes, you got my job. I'm like, well, you've done pretty well for yourself, seeing he's been the head coach at Wake Forest for the last 10 years. And it just all came together for me, because I came to Amherst on March 8th, 1993. It was a big change. You could not go from a different place more than going to Ramapo, where I think our average SAT was like 600 combined. Here, 600 English was incredibly low. Let's put it that way. So
talk to me about the landscape of the NESCAC then. Like, who were the top dogs in the league?
When I got here, Williams and Trinity were kind of going back and forth who might, win the championship, even though we didn't technically have a championship that we crowned until 2000. They were kind of the top dogs. And when I came to Amherst, there was some dysfunction that was going on in terms of, Coach Ostendorp was a legendary coach, but he had gotten older. They turned the program over to, one of his assistants, and it was just not good. And yet there was good players. The motivation was poor, and we really did. I mean, I just know in '92 they lost like 41-0 and 42-0 to Hamilton and Bowdoin. The next year, Joe Lamb coached on defense with me that first year. I was the D coordinator. He was a linebackers coach. We lived together. Joel's been at Harvard for 20 plus years. And then, Billy McBride and Jimmy McKeon were guys that had been on the staff. Previously, they were holdovers, and Billy still doesn't coach football anymore, but he's still in our athletic department. Our first two games, we beat Hamilton 6-0 and 21-0. So we had two shutout victories our first two games, and that kind of set the tone. I owe everything to Coach Selecki, amazing mentor. We kind of turned the program around here, and that was due to a lot of different people. Right. We've been a really good defense forever, and that really did set the tone for special teams defense. We ended up going 3-5 that first year, and then the next year in '94 we went 5-3, and then in '95 we went 5-2-1. But that was Williams had an amazing team, as good a team as they probably, one of their really good teams. In '95, there was the worst rainstorm that I've ever seen, and they played Tufts on that field up in Weston Field. So we played the next week, or maybe 2 weeks later, because they had Wesley next, and the field was unplayable. We went up the night before. ESPN 2 did our game at 10 in the morning in '95. Beano Cook was the announcer. He wanted to do it. The field, they put sawdust on the field. It was mud this thick. You couldn't move. I got up at like 5:30 in the morning. I came up and walked on the field, and I said, this is awesome. Because the only way we're going to beat these guys is to slow them down. And it ended up a 0-0 tie. And it was the famous Amherst win 0-0 because they were undefeated. We ended up 5-2-1. They ended up 7-0-1. That was a great moment because you couldn't do anything. Punts were landing and the ball was sticking in the ground. You can imagine that. The ball was not bouncing. It was stopping in the ground. So that was an early win for us, put it that way.
What are you learning, though, before you become a head coach about the NESCAC? It's a lot different than Ramapo, you're saying.
You're kind of learning that balance of academics and athletics and just the way that even the messages that you're sending. But school wins around here, right? I mean, we don't argue that. When we recruit kids, we make it very clear that, they're coming here to get a great education. We're going to support that. When there's conflict, school wins. Football never trumps school around here. And yet, it's proportional, right? Like, you can be a great football player and do all the things you have to do and also be a great student. I think we learned very on that can happen here. But I also learned in the NESCAC that you need to emphasize the importance of football. I mean, football ultimately is about coaching and recruiting. You got to get good coaches that can coach and do a good job, and then you got to get players. My first couple of years here, we only had a couple full-time guys. They were doing other jobs. Williams had an amazing model. Or in the early 90s, Coach Farley did an amazing job, but Mike Whalen, who's the AD at Wesleyan and was the head coach, he was the wrestling coach, football coach. Dave Caputi, who was the head coach at Bowdoin, was the softball coach, football coach. They had a lot of great full-time guys. And so one of my arguments around here was we need more full-time football coaches, and we were able to start to get that. Matt Ballard in '04, Luke Boussard in '05, Eddie Augustin in '08, and those guys, that's been the foundation and are still coaching with me today. So that was a big thing that you learned early, that commitment in admission and commitment to your coaching staff had a lot to do with what was going on, who was winning football games on Saturday. And that remains the same today. He really taught me how to be a head coach. And then, when he took the Yale job, I always say I was in the right spot at the right time. Yeah. I had the kids' support. We had a nice team. And, as one of my mentors here, one of my good friends, Jack Arena, our hockey coach, said, don't screw it up. And that's really been my mantra since the day I got here. Don't screw it up.
1997.
Yep.
Before the season, what was it like? So
Coach Selecki got the Yale job in December of '96.
So December '96, but at that time, you were named the interim.
Yes. So they basically said, you're going to be the interim. I was able to hire an offensive coordinator because I was going to be the head coach, keep my job as the D coordinator. So Don Falsick, who is currently my boss, is our AD. I went out. Don had worked for Coach Sedlecki at WPI. He was currently at WPI as the OC. And I went to Don and said, hey, listen, I want to hire you, but it's a one-year deal. Because if I don't get the head job, you're going to be out of a job. We kind of took that on together. I felt really good about our team. I also felt really good about the support from the school. They just weren't going to give it to a young guy. I had to prove myself.
How old were you at that time?
29,
you
maybe 30.
Okay. So
yeah, 29, 30. I was young.
I'm 30.
Yeah, so I was young, and I felt fine with it. Coach Sedlecki had offered me an opportunity to go to Yale with him, but I wanted to be a head coach. I loved Amherst. I believed the kids supported, I guess, my candidacy to be the head coach. So I felt really good going into the year that, if I didn't screw it up, if I just did what I had to do, I felt confident that I could do it. And we had a great, great year.
You end up going 7-1.
7-1.
And we'll go into how, because I read about how it ended.
Yeah,
the season ended, but
it was, as a young coach, again, sometimes you're just naive, right? And I had a great athletic director, Peter Gooding. I just felt confident that if I did things the right way, I'd get the job, right? And what I mean by the right way is just make good decisions, always put the program first, never put a kid in a tough spot, treat people the way they're supposed to be treated. I never really thought about not getting the job. And I made decisions, I've had to discipline some kids during the year, and people were like, well, dude, man, you need that kid playing. I'm like, yeah, he screwed up. He's got to sit out. I never let that worry me. I say, hey, do the right thing and good things will work out. And, we ended up having an amazing year. We go into the Williams game undefeated. They had been struggling for them. They were 5-2. For them, losing 2 games was a catastrophe. So we were definitely the favorite team going into that game. We had to travel to Williamstown, and it was just incredible. They went up by like 21 points. Our defense hadn't given up more than probably 7 points a game. And all of a sudden, we come storming back. Then they go ahead. But famously, this was before overtime, we scored with maybe a minute, maybe 55 seconds. And I used to live right over there. And I went home and I got Sports Illustrated, just as a magazine. And Michigan State had run a trick play on an extra point like 2 weeks before. It was on a Wednesday night, I think. So on Thursday, when we came back for practice, I said, I want to put this in. They called it Ranger. I'm like, we're going to call it Rambo. And basically it was like a lonely end. Like our wing, when they ran off, he went outside the numbers. Now back in 95, the officials, the game was different. They did not stand on the sideline. They stood like outside the numbers, right? So, and yet it was legal that my player, he was on the field, but he was technically, and I went over this with the officials before the game. When we scored to go down by 1, I said, we're going for 2. There's no overtime at this point. And so we ran it. The funny thing, Greg Handel was the left guard, and he was late coming out. So all of a sudden we're screaming, so he came out late, which kind of drew everybody's attention to him because Todd Haggerty is outside the numbers and Matty Hall is our holder. Matty Hall, I told him, Matty, you can have your knee on the ground, catch it and get up and throw it. He didn't believe me. So if you watch the tape, his knee is off the ground. He caught it, threw it to Hags, and we go ahead by 1. And it could have, should have been the greatest win ever. They get the ball back and they drove, they called a penalty on our kid knocking their quarterback out of bounds on our sideline. That was one of the worst calls, a roughing call. That,
You're still salty about it.
I'm still salty about that. And, it put their kid in field goal range. I mean, they had a freshman, his name has escaped me, his dad played for the Pats. Well, he had never kicked, but he was kicking on Friday. People kicking on Fridays. They're jerking around. The kid freaking kicks a 2-yard field goal with 3 seconds to beat us. It was a horrific loss. I feel bad for those kids to this day, and yet people talk about it as the greatest game in New England football history. It was a heck of a game, back and forth. Rich Willard threw for 5 touchdowns. It was a special day. Even though we came up on the short end, it was a special day of football.
Yeah, and we'll go into the whole Williams rivalry. We have a whole separate part of this interview dedicated to that team. But Coach, so you get the job. It's yours. What's it like addressing your team? Obviously not the first time as the head coach, but you're like, I'm here to stay. This is my team. At that time, did you know, like, hey guys, I'm going to be here for 30 plus years, so don't even worry about it?
People ask me that, and Dave Hickson, our legendary basketball coach, won the Hall of Fame last year. Dave's retired. And we always joke about it, because he said, don't mess with happy. I've always been happiest just coaching, right? And coaching football. I got a chance to be the head softball coach prior to football. I absolutely loved it. My wife was on Instagram or something yesterday, and Sarah Rinaldi was one of the women that I coached in 1995 and 96 in softball, and she just had a baby, and we messaged her last night. But it goes fast, right? I mean, it's like, for me, I've been here 31 years. Doesn't feel that way. I'm 58 years old. I still think I'm 28. So it just happened really fast. And I have loved this institution. I love the kids. And so I've never really looked around. You get some different opportunities at times, and people call you, and I'm like, you know what? don't mess with happy. That's what Hicks always said. I'm happy here. I raised my kids here. I have 2 boys. My wife went to Amherst College. And so we've built our family here, and I really didn't want to be any other place. That's why I've been here so long, fortunately, because I've always been supported by our administration and our assistant coaches. The number of assistant coaches that have come through here that have assisted and helped me, it's endless. I couldn't even put the list together.
We're gonna get into that. Was my next question,
but
Coach.
it's a heck of a group. I just been really fortunate to be in a place that supports football. It's not king, and yet it's important to this institution. And we've had, a good measure of success. And that's because we've had great players, great assistant coaches that have worked hard and put our guys in a position to be successful and let guys do their job, empower people to do their job well. That's what I try to do. That's what I learned from Coach Ford. That's what I learned from Coach Zielecki, and that's what I've tried to do here.
And what were some of the first bricks you laid as a head coach? I always ask head coaches that, what were the first few culture things that you put in?
I got this from my dad, but it's do your best every day, right? Attitude and effort are the 2 things that we talk about a lot. Those are the 2 things that you have an opportunity to control every single day. Show up with a good attitude, be positive, upbeat, whether you're in class, at practice, and you control how hard you work. Slow, fast, doesn't matter, but you control your effort. And then one of my favorite things, and I took this from Coach Ford, is life's 10% what happens and 90% how you respond to what happens. Life is about dealing with adversity. And so that really has always been the mantra of be the best person, be the best student, be the best athlete you can be. Attitude, effort, right? We talk about love, trust, attitude as kind of core principles. Those are the things that I've been saying for 30 years and never have wavered from those things of just, hey, do your best every day, attitude and effort, and crank it up. That's what we say around here is crank it. That's kind of an ethos. It's just, what else is there? Let's attack every single day to be the best we can be. So that's really been the blueprint foundation of anything that we've ever done. Those are the things that I've been preaching since day one here.
And you mentioned your assistant coaches, and we got to talk about that tree because there are a lot of people locally and nationally that have come out of here. But I have a specific question about who was your defensive line coach in the year 1999 to 2000?
Yeah, Matty Patricia. So how that worked out was Matty played for Don Falstick. Stick was the OC at the time, now our AD at RPI. And so Matty, famously, graduated, was a rocket scientist, literally was a rocket scientist, but wanted to get into coaching, had done a little volunteer stuff at Syracuse, but really we were his first coaching job. And he was just amazing. He was awesome, and if he listened to me, he would have been the O-line coach at St. Lawrence. My good friend who I GA'd with, Chris Phelps, was the head coach at St. Lawrence. He offered him a full-time offensive line job. And I said, you should take it. And Matty was like, you know what? I really want to be a Division I guy. So he went back to Syracuse as an off-the-field film GA. He was just filming practice. The rest is history, but Matty was an amazing coach back then. Always pushed technology. I remember him doing PowerPoint stuff, and I didn't even know what that was. He would put together presentations, and I'm like, what is that? That's amazing. He would synthesize film and different things because Matty was a smart engineer type guy. When he went to work for Belichick, they were pencil and paper. He's the one that transferred them to be like, this makes no sense. We should be putting this into Excel, automation, right. And I'm going to get you more information than you think.
Wow.
And so, no, Matty was pretty incredible in terms of just, being on the forefront of that kind of stuff.
What was he like with his players?
Phenomenal. I mean, to this day, so Pat McGee was a great player for us. All-American his senior year, graduated in 2002, but 2000 and 2001, SAC leader. It's one of the most decorated Navy SEALs in the history of our military. An amazing human. And they're still, to this day, incredibly close. Patty Hayes, who I had dinner with last Saturday night with his family, he played D-line, still close. They still talk. He's just an incredibly likable human. Sometimes he gives you a gruff personality on TV, but he's a teddy bear. He's one of the nicest guys you ever want to meet. He had a huge impact here and then went on and had an amazing and still having an amazing career.
And what was it like seeing him rise through the coaching ranks like that? Because, he was just here.
Yeah.
Helping you, and you hired him.
It was cool, right? I mean, it was not surprising, when he went to Syracuse and then his role changed immediately and he became a GA for George DeLeon, and we would go up there to visit, and his acumen, his knowledge went through the roof. And I just knew that this is a really smart, motivated human being, and really he just needed an opportunity. And Bill Belichick was lacrosse, barely football guy at Wesleyan, so Matty just fit that mold that. If you're smart, motivated, hardworking, it doesn't matter what kind of player you were. It's about what you can do, relaying information to your players. And he coached the linebackers, Teddy Bruschi, all those guys. I mean, it's an offensive guard, from RPI. What are you telling those guys? Well, you're providing them with information. You're studying. You're giving them the clues, and so they respect his effort, and that's why he was able to be such a great coach, and is to this day.
Yeah, and it goes beyond him. I mean, he might be the one that made it to the NFL, but then, Coach, you got Jeff Moore, Coach Spinato, Coach Facillo, Coach Banks, like Marquise Watson, like Coach. There's a ton of guys that have come here. What do you preach to your assistants that go on to allow them to have such great careers?
Again, anything that I do, it really is what I learned from Coach Ford. Some of it is just what I was saying, like just work hard every day, grab an oar, right? We talk about, but really, when you think about it, if you are a person that gets things done consistently, you'll be recognized by the powers that be. That's kind of what I'm preaching all the time to these guys is just be that guy that gets things done. There's always tasks that need to happen. Recruiting, social media, it's graphics. And so make yourself invaluable. That's really what I've always said to guys is because I always use Coach Broussard as an example. Luke came as a young guy and he just did stuff. And I'm like, well, you're not even supposed to do that. He just did it. And so the next thing you know is like, hey, Luke, Boost, Boost. He became invaluable to me and remains to this day, right? But it's one of those things where that's how you distinguish yourself is just be a person that gets things done on a consistent basis. And so really that's what I've said to guys is like work hard every day, come in with a good attitude, show up early, leave late, but make yourself invaluable to your boss because he's going to want to keep you around. And so typically those are the things that I've tried to share with guys. And also don't take yourself too seriously. We always say like, you got to be humble. We're all just plugging away here. Don't be entitled. Just go grab an oar and get it done. That's what I've preached.
So you get your first conference title in 2000, and then you go on your run in the 2000s of where you won. Was it 5 out of 7?
Championships? It was 9 and 11 and 13, 14, 15. We had some really good teams. Again, amazing coaches. We did, and I would say we got really lucky at times. I would say we got some good hops and probably evened out some of the hops recently. But yeah, that was a lot of fun, obviously. Some great teams and great memories and hard fought wins. But it's the relationships, those teams. I always think about, I know what it means to me or to have those memories, but you really want your players to have those incredible memories that they continue to relive and share with each other to this day. And that's what makes that really special.
And if you want to talk about some of the key players during that time, also, I have to ask, because Fusillo said, ask him about the 2011 article. You changed the offense during that time. You brought the up-tempo to the NESCAC.
Yeah, I mean, that was, and again, I say that was more Don than me, but we had talked about the evolution of football, and Stick was the OC. We just went up tempo, and it really was. We had great players. The 09 team, Chris Govey was one of our captains, and really was an amazing leader. Mike Taylor, we had a great defense, and we won a lot of close games. But then in 11, Brian McMahon as a quarterback was unbelievable, but he got hurt, so Blake Grauer ended up being the quarterback for the first 4 games, but we had so much talent. Eric Bunker, who's the receivers coach at Brown, Eric was the offensive player of the year that year in the NESCAC in 2011, and so yeah, we had some great players, but we went up tempo and we were ripping plays at an unbelievable mark. But you can only play fast if the chains are moving, and the chains were moving those couple years, and that was a lot of fun.
So I saw the D3 Chip Kelly, Coach. You brought the up-tempo to D3 up here, at least, definitely. You were definitely the first teams doing up here.
I don't know exactly, but that, like I said, Don and the offensive staff did an amazing job with that. And again, football evolves. I mean, I always remember in 2011, we were playing fast, and we got out to a huge lead against Trinity. And then, Trinity was an amazing team, and they came back, and we kept playing fast on offense. And I'm like, what are we doing here? We got to slow this thing down. But it's interesting. Tempo is an interesting thing because you got to be able to play fast, but you also got to be able to play slow when you need to play slow. And we kept turning it. We kept giving the ball back to them, and they were coming back. And I remember going like, we need to be able to do both. You know what I mean? It can't be an all or one situation. But we had a great group. Alex Vetras, and then Brian McMahon and Blake Rao, the quarterbacks, were able to do that, and those are good teams.
So now I got to ask you about the Williams rivalry. I hear it's, what do they phrase it as, Coach? Biggest little game
in America.
In America.
Yeah.
Coach, so talk about Williams as a rival. What makes this rivalry so special?
We're similar places. I mean, the history is, Amherst took books from the library and they wanted to move a school more to civilization, as they say. So Amherst kind of came out of Williams. That's the lore. So we've just been great rivalries forever. And there's always just a lot more interest, right? That week there's build up. And there's just alumni interest, and a lot of times there's interest from outside. We have ESPN come, we have different people come and interview. So there's a lot of interest built into it. But what I always say, for me, it's our seniors' last game. These guys play football for 12, 13, 14 years. It's completely who they identify as a football player. And that part of their life is just it's gonna be gone after that game. We don't have a lot of guys that go on and play after that game. And so when it's your last game, you want that to be incredibly memorable. And so for me, the rivalry is more about that. It's that we always play them last. Yes, it's your arch rival and you want to win that game, but it's your last game that you'll ever put that on, that you'll ever feel the brotherhood the same way. You're never going to be able to recreate that feeling. And so it's incredibly important in my world to win that football game, for those guys to end it in a positive way. That's what I always focus on. And then it's when you talk about the guys from 1964, and they're going to intimately talk about their Williams game, right? And so it's the tradition of each year. And then there's been a lot of upsets. I mean, there's been a lot of teams that have been 7-0 both ways. The underdog won. And then it's obviously every sport, but in football, you got Harvard, Yale, you got Army, Navy, you got Lehigh, Lafayette, and you got, Amherst Williams. It's an incredibly important thing to the school, to our alumni, and it just kind of is infused in our current players. Yeah, we've had a lot of great days. We've had some really tough days, but I've appreciated the rivalry. Dick Farley was the head coach there when I first started. Incredible coach, great human, and I always think of Dick, as being a big part of it. Mike Whalen, the different coaches that we've gone against. I've always had great respect for Williams and the college and the program. You just want to beat them real bad. And I think that those are mutual feelings.
Last question about Williams, just what's the tradition in the week of that game? Like, what do you do specifically to get your team fired up?
Yeah, so, it's funny. There's a couple things that on some level, it's just another game. You don't all of a sudden we got to prepare harder. It's like, well, no, we prepare hard for every team. So on some level, you want to stay to your routine. Now, a couple of things that we do, the biggest thing is, our last practice, which we consider Thursday, we have a fire ceremony. So all the seniors get an opportunity to throw something into the fire, but they talk about the importance of that, but also the importance of the 4-year experience. And so if there's one thing that gets crystallized is what I kind of talked about, is how football has helped shape our individual seniors and what that game means to them. And so if there's one thing that we do that's special is we call it our last practice ceremony on that Thursday after practice. And it's really cool and it's special. And guys, it's really raw because it's emotional, and guys talk about what the 4-year experience meant, what this game means, but also just football in general and how it's helped shape them. So that's something that we've done, and we started that, I think, in 03 or 04. That was a tradition. Kevin Trigonis, one of my former coaches who played up at St. Lawrence, they did something similar. We were trying to think of something to do something special, and we've done that for the last 20 plus, and that's been really good.
I love that, Coach. And before we round out the interview, if you just want to talk about your 30-year career. You know, you are, the research I did, the hours of research, by the way, you are New England's current winningest college head coach, and you're going on a list, hopefully, of maybe on the list of maybe 200 one year. If you want to talk and just reflect on these 30 years and what it's meant to you to be a Mammoth.
Yeah, I mean, again, I try to I try not to do that too much, right? You try to stay present. You're always talking about your players, like stay in the moment, keep your head and your feet in the same place. And so, I think someday I'll reflect on that stuff. I mean, right now I feel like, we got a lot of work to do in front of us. And I know that sounds corny, but I just been blessed, right? I have an amazing family. It starts there. I have an amazing wife who supported me through this entire thing. I have my two sons that they're everything to me. And the toughest part now is they play college football at the University of Rochester and I don't get to see them, right? You know what I mean? And I am excited this year, the way the calendar works. We'll play Williams on the 9th for my oldest son, JB. We'll play his last game because he's a senior at Hobart the week after our season. So I'm gonna get to go and really enjoy that experience. But no, I just been really fortunate to be at a place that has supported what we're trying to do. And I know I say it, but don't screw it up, right? Just we got a good thing here. We're able to attract good players, and you want to put them in a position to win. And so that's what we've tried to do. And don't ever take yourself too seriously, and always know that somebody's always trying to beat you. And so we got to work hard every day and be the best version of ourselves that we can be. And so that's what I've tried to focus on. It's gone so fast. I am looking forward to hopefully a lot more years here, but we'd like to win a championship, and that's what we're going to try and do.
I want to ask, if you could just tell the public, why Amherst? If there's a recruit watching, if there's somebody that wants to be a part of the team, why should they be at Amherst Mammoth?
Well, I mean, first of all, you're not going to go to a better school in the country. We have a proven track record and a reputation that really is second to none. And a liberal arts education is also really special because what you major in will most likely have very little to do with what you do the rest of your life. So you can come here, major in history, political science, English, psychology, economics, math. We have a ton of poli-sci majors that go to Wall Street, that are working in financial industry. The beauty of this place is it teaches you how to learn at a much higher level. From that standpoint, that's why you want to come. Our network is second to none. The reason you want to come to Amherst is this place is going to work for you for the next 40 and 50 years. I've been here a long time, know a lot of our alums intimately. We connect our current players, but our guys get unbelievable opportunity after graduation. But then the other piece is this is a school that embraces athletics. You're an important piece here, all right? Albeit you're always going to be a student first, etc. But this place, you can fill your cup here. You can get a great education, play in an unbelievable football program with great tradition where coaches are going to take an incredibly personal interest in them individually, every kid, regardless of their stature of start or not, doesn't matter. And you're going to get an opportunity to get a great job and really kind of, knock it out of the park. So Amherst is incredibly special. It starts with the people. People here care about our students and want to see them thrive and give them every tool in order to achieve that. And so we're just part of the cog here. It's been a great run for me. I've had a ton of help from our assistant coaches and players. Just want to keep it rolling. But Amherst is an amazing place. Come check it out. Because if you come here and you see where we are, the facilities and everything, it's a place you're going to want to be.
We always end our interviews. Would you like to thank your friends and family and those who inspired and mentored you?
Yeah, I absolutely would. I mean, I've been really fortunate to have, special people in my life. My coaching mentors, Dave Whitcomb, Bob Ford, and Jackson Leckie. Really, those guys helped shape me. But all the assistant coaches that I currently have, Matty Ballard and Luke Boussard and, Malik Grove, a young rising star in the profession, Eddie Augustin, Malik Gatewood's coaching our secondary, Ken Maxwell, Turner Ginty, all those guys. We got a great staff, but I've had so many, coaches come through here. You mentioned Jeff Moore, Anthony Fusillo, Adam Banks, LJ Spinato, all doing amazing things at the prep level. I'm really proud of those guys. And yeah, we're just going to keep cranking it.
Thank you, Coach. Everyone, give us a huge thumbs up for Coach Mills for sharing his story. And if you want to follow him or have any interest in Amherst College, it will all be in the link below. Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, Alex.